Hello and welcome back to another in our series of Northern Road Link live streaming sessions. My name is Don Parkinson and I'll be your host for this and other streaming sessions to be done over the next few weeks, focusing on the feedback we've received on the environmental assessment terms of reference. As you may know, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, also known as MECP, has extended the comment period for an additional 90 days until December 14th, 2022, for 22 Indigenous communities that may be affected and or interested in the NRL project. Today, we will be having a discussion on the EA process and higher level EA comments that we've received on the environmental assessment terms of reference, which is like the work plan for the environmental assessment. And in the following weeks, running up to the closing of the comment period on December 14th, we'll dive more deeply into each of the five subject areas or themes of the comments to help our audience better understand what the comments were that we've received about the terms of reference um, document itself. And so we hope you enjoy these sessions, and we hope it helps you understand the feedback we've been getting, and we'll try and clarify things as we go through the comments as well too. So we hope this is a useful process for you. So why don't we get things started here and talk about one of the themes that was mentioned a number of times in the comments by a few different communities, and that was about this regional assessment. And so just to give you an idea of the kinds of comments, what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll read the quotes, some of the quotes that I've taken from the comments. And for a regional assessment, one of the quotes was need for a regional assessment that covers all potential development of the entire James Bay lowlands area, and that assessment is co-developed, co-implemented, and co-enforced by a body of affected First Nations in the region. So what this basically means is the community or communities asking for this are looking for a full regional assessment to be done, undertaken by a group of what they're calling affected First Nations, before the individual project environmental assessments are can proceed any further. And so that was one comment that was received with regard to regional assessment. There's another quote that I took as well too that was in the comments. Quote, ensures that no one will understand what the full impacts will be and will make decisions in the dark that will likely end up hurting us. So the current approach, that's their opinion of the current approach. And so what they're talking about there is they're claiming that there's a lack of transparency in the current process. Another comment that we got was, quote, Ontario's colonial approach to sharing its decision making with an arbitrarily selected subset of First Nations in the region. And this quote indicates or suggests that the current approach being undertaken through the individual environmental assessment, and that approach to decision making regarding the project isn't different from any done previously. Now, just to clarify for everyone, the Northern Road Link project has two proponents, both remote First Nations, Martin Falls First Nation and Webequie First Nation. These are the two First Nations closest to the Ring of Fire, and they are willing proponents of the project and are pursuing the project um, to develop themselves more economically and generally improve their standard of living. But at the same time, they are serving as they're doing their own environmental assessments on this project, own internal ones, and they're serving as currently as environmental stewards and co-decision makers, and will continue to be in that role going forward as well too. So that was an interesting quote we got in the comments. Another quote was, the consideration of the project's impacts in isolation without considering the possible cumulative effects of these other mining exploration projects, mining development projects, and related infrastructure, including the several other all-season roads proposed in the region for the same purpose, will inevitably underrepresent the potential impacts of the project. Again, another strong statement that we or comment that we received, and it's suggesting that the cumulative impacts or effects of this project aren't being looked at um, with each of these projects, and even though each of these projects has to look at cumulative effects, has to look at past, current, and reasonably foreseeable future projects. Each one of these road projects undergoing an individual EA has to look at cumulative impacts, and there also is, for those that aren't aware of it, there regional assessment is being conducted by the federal government through the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada. So there's a lot of comments asking for essentially a regional assessment that is led by affected First Nations. A lot of comments related to that. Uh, and again, it seems like there's a level of mistrust when it comes to the individual environmental assessments in terms of whether they will uh, satisfactorily assess cumulative impacts of the road projects. The next theme that we encountered is the idea of a single environmental assessment, and we've heard this comment from a few communities. The argument is quite often described as claiming that the provincial government is what you call project splitting. So they're dividing a project into three different segments and conducting environmental assessments for each. So what they're saying is these should all be assessed as a single project, and just for clarification, the three different road projects, the Webequie Supply Road, the Martin Falls Community Access Road, and the Northern Road Link projects, were all proposed at different times, and they were proposed for different reasons. Um, and that is why each is undergoing its own individual environmental assessment. And as such, as I mentioned before, each project will look at cumulative effects, and while it's doing that, we'll look at the residual effects of the project as well as impacts of any past, present, and again, reasonably foreseeable future projects as well. That's what's done typically as part of the cumulative effects work. And as I mentioned earlier, in addition to those three individual environmental assessments that are being undertaken, um, there is a regional assessment process that is currently being directed by the federal government via the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada. So there were a number of comments requesting this single EA, but there are very good reasons why they are three separate EAs, because they are three separate projects devised at different times for different purposes. Let's move now to the local and regional study areas. There was a lot of comments on these areas, and the comments, I would say, related to the fact that Indigenous communities needed to have the opportunity to play an active role in defining local and regional study areas for the different valued components, and the valued components. Just to remind people, valued components are the the key the key things that are most important to community members, for example, such as water quality, um, uh, Aboriginal and treaty rights as well. These are and then what happens is these are assessed as part of the environmental assessment process. So what we heard was communities saying that they wanted more input on these local and regional study areas and defining the boundaries of these and so let me just read one of the quotes here. It's quote, "The proposed local study areas and regional study areas are of serious concern to us and in some cases appear to be highly inadequate to capture potential downstream or down muskeg effects of the project and its combined impacts with other proposed or foreseeable projects. Anything impacting the Albany River system will not stop at these drawn borders. It will flow straight toward us." So that was one uh, excerpt from comments that we've received, and the facts are that we have made these valued components and the associated study areas, local and regional study areas, we've made that information available to communities and to the general public for comment. And we welcome input on these study areas. And in the case that was identified here, where you're looking at potential downstream effects, we do look at, and it's mentioned in the terms of reference, we do look at pathways. So we look at pathways of effects as well too. So we would take in downstream effects into consideration. So those are things that are definitely looked at very closely by our project team. And here's another quote here. The regional study area should include the full length of the proposed road. So that's Northern Road Link, as well as the Webequie Supply Road and the Martin Falls Community Access Road, and also the Ring of Fire development. And given the express purpose of the project is to access this development. So what they're saying is the regional study area should look at all of these projects as well as all reasonably foreseeable projects going forward, and as well as past projects and any current projects that are in the area. And that is in fact what is taking place. So as mentioned previously, each of the projects, the individual road projects, is going through an individual environmental assessment process, which includes cumulative effects analysis. And as I mentioned earlier, the federal government, through the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, is conducting a regional assessment. So it is looking at all the projects in the area as well. So we have three different projects, individual EAs, looking at cumulative impacts, and then we have a regional assessment project looking at cumulative impacts as well. So there's a lot of study being done to address that comment. And another quote here, must be expanded to align with a larger area based on, so the study area is what they're referring to, must be expanded to align with a larger area based on watersheds or community impacts. For example, regional and local economy, rather than arbitrary distances from the proposed corridor. So again, I'll go back to the fact that a regional assessment is being undertaken to look at the effects of the project covering a larger area. And again, the individual EAs do take into consideration past, current, and reasonably foreseeable future projects as well too. So there's, again, I'm repeating myself, but these are important things to remember for our viewers. Is that these are being captured as part of the various studies being done in the region. And these spatial boundaries are open for comment, and we welcome your comments. And we're trying to make sure that we share these comments through events such as this, where we bring those comments forward and talk about them We are required as the technical advisors to the proponent. We are required to respond to all of the comments that we received, and we have, and then we submit those comments to the provincial government and the federal government for review. Another quote that I'll share with you that we received from communities was, quote, "Without appropriate spatial boundaries identified in collaboration with impacted First Nations, the environmental assessment should not be able to commence, as they represent confirmation that the scope of the environmental assessment will be adequate in relation to the potential effects of the project. The preliminary spatial boundaries must be developed in consultation with impacted Indigenous nations, and until they are modified, no further approval should be granted for the tour." So basically, what's being said here is that nothing should go ahead project-wise on the environmental assessment or with the terms of reference. There should be no approval of the terms of reference until uh, collaboration has been undertaken with communities on the appropriate spatial boundaries. So, but those opportunities have been made and are being made out there for communities to comment on these boundaries as well. I should add that the tour review periods have actually been extended, as I talked about at the beginning of the today's show, and there's been an unprecedented amount of consultation effort conducted in a variety of different forms, and we do acknowledge that the the pandemic, caused a lot of problems in terms of consultation, but we pivoted and provided a lot of different alternative ways, as well as the provincial government provided infrastructure to help communities better participate in project discussions as well too. And so there's been an unprecedented amount of consultation effort. The forms that this consultation effort has taken is greater now than ever before. Um, and we are trying to tailor it as much as possible to specific communities. We send out regular correspondence to communities, telling them about various options available to them in terms of consultation, and allowing them to basically choose an appropriate form of consultation that best suits them. And we've also asked communities to share with us their consultation protocols so that we can ensure that any consultation is done in an appropriate and sensitive way. So lots of comments on the local and regional study areas. Let's move now to the project owner and operator comments. These are pretty interesting comments, and these are very understandable comments because the owner and operator of the project going forward has not yet been identified. The focus at this point has been on the completion of the environmental assessment, but there will be discussions going forward, and have been to some degree, about who might own and operate this road once it's actually built. Uh, I'll just read you the quote, and the quote was, "This environmental assessment will require detailed information to ensure sufficient funding sources and operator experience are at hand to avoid or minimize potential accidents or malfunctions from occurring. Knowing the name of the operator provides insight into its spill contingency plans, oil pollution emergency plans, and emergency response plans. Without knowing the name of the operator, the funding sources and time frame, operators' experience, jurisdictional aspects of the project, Mushkegowuk, who was the complainant here, it would be unable to properly assess the risks and the mitigation plans." So the reality is that right now that they're the operator or owner of the road is not yet known. And if the EA is approved, it will be accompanied by a list of commitments, as any EA is accompanied with, that must be fulfilled by the owner. as part of the project. These project commitments include what's called a detailed environmental management plan. And so it talks about the environment management plan would talk about environmental management practices during construction as well as during operation. And it's quite detailed. And I should add that as well, there will be a monitoring program, very likely recommended, or a series of monitoring programs targeting different disciplines that would be associated with the approval of this project. And those may occur for a, a specified period of time, or they might be for an unspecified period of time. So in perpetuity, it just depends on what is agreed to and what is accepted by the environmental regulators, and in this case MECP and IAC. So there are many safeguards that in place to ensure the proper operation of the road. It's not dependent as much on the operator necessarily. I mean, the operator executes the plans as they're defined. They would be responsible and legally responsible for properly executing the environmental management plan. So it's more the process of defining commitments, of defining the monitoring plan and operational requirements that need to be met. And then the operator is expected and legally bound to comply with these whatever's been stipulated in the improved environmental assessment, if it is improved. So that gives you an idea of talks a bit about the project owner and operator series of comments. Let's move now to the nature of mining activities in the Ring of Fire related comments. And this was interesting. Basically, the comments related to wanting to know more about specific mining activities that would occur in the Ring of Fire. And again, uh, as the technical advisors to the proponents, we only know as much as has been made available by the are interested in initiating projects in the area. The project team works with whatever information is available to them. The nature and extent of mining activities is highly variable. It depends on lots of factors, whether it's commodity prices, other factors. So that sometimes projects can't be defined clearly. All that can be defined is maybe a phasing sequence for projects. So it's very hard to get an exact idea of the activities going forward. Um, it's easier to get an idea once a mining proponent initiates an environmental assessment process, because at that point they are required, because they have defined a project, they're required to provide more details of that project as part of initiating that environmental assessment. So there will be more information over time revealed about the nature of the mining activities in the Ring of Fire. Let's move now to the consultation plan comment themes. The environmental assessment for the project, this is a quote, should not proceed until the proponent demonstrates that the terms of a consultation plan have been mutually agreed upon and that the mutually agreed upon terms of an engagement agreement with the proponent for the project are developed that reflect specific protocols and laws. So this ties back to a little bit about what I was talking about earlier. Um, the project team solicits communities to ask for any consultation protocols that they may have prior to engaging in consultation with them. We would very much like your consultation protocols so that we can make sure that we are sensitive to the the nature and the type of consultation that your community would prefer. So we welcome those, and we would like very much to respect those, and we will respect those going forward as well. And let's move now to the final comment themes, and that's cumulative effects assessment. And um, I'll read you a couple of different quotes here, and we'll talk briefly about these. So one of the quotes is, "The proponent must modify the terms of reference to incorporate the latest guidance from IAC, or the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, with respect to cumulative effects assessment, and ensure that cumulative effects on the rights of Indigenous peoples is included." Given how vital the cumulative effects assessment is to accurately assessing the potential effects of the project to the environment and the rights and interests of Indigenous nations, a much more detailed approach to cumulative effects assessment must be developed before the terms of reference are approved. The proponent must be required to confirm that this approach has been developed in collaboration with impacted nations and demonstrate how the results of the regional assessment for the Ring of Fire will inform the basis of this cumulative effects assessment for this project. So just to clarify for everyone, based on these comments, it's expected that the NRL project will be subject to a federal impact assessment. And as such, what's called a tailored impact statement guideline, set of guidelines called the Tailored Impact Statement Guidelines, or TISG, will be issued. And this serves as essentially a terms of reference, so the work plan for the federal impact assessment. So this would capture all the federal requirements of the impact assessment and capture the requirements that were mentioned in the quote that I provided earlier. So that, in a very short period of time, captures some of the higher level EA comments and EA process related comments. We really appreciate these comments coming from Indigenous communities where we want to discuss them. That's why we're bringing them forward again to share with everyone the comments we received and the nature of the comments, and provide some clarification from our side, from the project side. So um, we hope you found this helpful. So I just want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to our streaming sessions. We really appreciate it. And we hope you join us again in 2 weeks when we continue our discussion of what we've heard about the environmental assessment terms of reference. Um, I just want to remind Indigenous communities and the general public that they can engage with the project team in a number of different ways, and this is really important, and whatever suits the communities and the public best. Some of these ways, some of these engagement options include focus group sessions, community sessions, drop-in sessions, virtual focus groups, virtual community presentations, teleconferences, local radio call-in shows where we could visit your community and go on local radio and discuss the project, and online surveys. So there's lots of different ways that we can consult with you on this project. Again, if you can share with us your consultation protocol, we can shape it whatever way you like, whatever suits you best. We're happy to tailor it to your needs. And so once again, I want to thank all of you for joining me today, and in 2 weeks. Miigwech.